Hello and a very, very warm welcome to this panel. Welcome also from my end to the Europa Camp here in Hamburg, which is the city that it has called itself the gateway to the world. I think that's a wonderful hypothesis for our panel today about crossing borders and migration in Europe. Ever since the birth of the European Union, the topic of migration was both a humanitarian and a political. And it seems the last couple of years, these two issues have become the antagonists of a debate. And I'm really, really glad to have this panel on my side today, because I think this is exactly the issue that these wonderful four people are working on each and every day, the question of humanitarianism, the question of politics in migration, and I would like to introduce them. So to my right is Theresa Breuer. Theresa is a fellow journalist and a filmmaker, and she is the co-founder of Kabul Luftbrücke, which we will talk about just now. Then we have Koch. Anne is a researcher with a focus on global issues, and she works at Stiftung Wissenschaft and Politik, SWP. Welcome. And next to Anne, we have Larry Macaulay. Larry is the co-founder, is also a journalist, and he's the founder and editor of Refugee radio network, amongst a lot of other activities that we hope we can cover today. And we have Lara, Chedraoui, singer and musician, and also an activist. We will see her singing later today, but before that we will discuss migration and activism for displaced people. So welcome to all of you, and Theresa, I would like to start with you, and maybe we go back a little bit in time to last summer, when you decided to abandon your position as an observer and become an activist, and maybe you can describe that very moment to us.
Absolutely.
Is there some?
Yeah. So I used to live in Afghanistan for two years, and I was working there as a journalist and filmmaker. I was following young women who were attempting to climb the highest mountain in Afghanistan. I had quite a lot of good friends there, and when it was clear that the Taliban were about to take over the entire country, I thought that I needed to do everything in my power to get these people out, because I felt that my work, or me working with them, had put them in danger. You know, the Taliban would consider young women who were filmed by a Western filmmaker a traitor and potentially harm them. So I asked around in my circle of friends, in my activist network circle of friends, people who've done rescue missions in the Mediterranean, and asked, hey, what can we do? What do you think we should do? How do we get people out of Afghanistan? And a friend said, let's charter a plane and fly people out. And insanely enough, this somehow worked. After 2 weeks of not sleeping, not eating, getting a team together in Afghanistan, in Germany, and at the airport, we managed to evacuate probably the last civilians during the military evacuation at the end of August. And we didn't stop ever since. We've been evacuating them ever since.
And where are you at now?
You mean numbers-wise?
Yeah.
Well, we've evacuated over 2,000 people so far, and we've assisted the evacuation of over 3,000 people.
Amazing.
And we do it several times a week. So
and just now, behind stage, I asked you, back in the summer of last year, would you have thought that in the spring of this year you would still be doing this, or would you have thought that maybe things would change, things that maybe authorities would join in, or?
Well, it was very clear that when we continued the evacuations after the end of the military airlift, that this would be something that we'd be doing for a long time. Because once you take on that responsibility, we have to continue to fulfill it. And it was clear that the government was not able to do the work that we did. They didn't have the same kind of resources, and frankly, for a long time also not the political will. But there were still tens of thousands of people with German approval waiting in Afghanistan to get to Germany. So it was clear that it would take a while, but it was also always clear that we do want the government to take over eventually. So we're showing how it can be done, and then we want the government to take over. We'd be happy to assist, you know, and cooperate even when it comes to the evacuations, but eventually it's a government job that needs to be fulfilled.
Mm. And maybe that's a good time to bring Anne into this discussion, because so when we were facing this challenge back in the summer of last year, I think in Europe we were still at a narrative that came from 2015, which was basically within Europe we were thinking about quotas, and outside of Europe, it was about border control and security. And maybe you can give us a little update of what changed now facing the war in Ukraine. There has been a lot of change also policy-wise. And maybe you can also explain to us what do you think could be here to stay also.
Thank you. Yes, I will try. I'm not sure, to be honest, how much has changed fundamentally at this point. It's striking, as someone who has observed German and EU migration and asylum policy for the past 10 years or so, how starkly different the responses in previous refugee situations and today are. So the one key difference, of course, is the activation of the Temporary Protection Directive for Ukrainian refugees that was decided unanimously by EU member states very swiftly, at an astonishing speed considering how long EU processes normally take, and that grants fairly extensive rights to people fleeing Ukraine. Access to the labor market, to health service, to education, to social welfare, possibly most importantly, freedom to choose their own place of residence within the EU, no sort of mandatory relocation to a specific country. And all, well, that specific, this last point is in really stark contrast to how refugees have been treated and redistributed and argued over for the past 5-7 years and before. However, this is distinct, an approach that is applied to refugees from Ukraine, and I don't think I'm sort of hopeful, optimistic enough to see this as a general change for EU asylum policy. I think what we see now can contain important lessons for future policy, but it's not that we see a fundamental shift for everyone. I think one last sentence, what the Ukrainian situation now really exposes is that it is a question of political will, you mentioned the word, and not capacity. To what extent and in what way we support people fleeing their home countries.
Mm-hmm. Larry, would you share that idea or that hypothesis?
Yeah, she's right. The migratory situation at the moment in the European Union or in the West, for me, I've always said it, is a case of Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. It's a hopeless case for people of color. It's true. The migratory face now at the moment is white. So we are not equal before other people. But life goes on. We will not die, all of us. The policies shift like yo-yo, you know. If you're white, if you're from Ukraine, oh, the door is open. If you're black, if you're from Africa, the door is closed. You still have to wait. We have people waiting for so many years until now. And is that fairness? No. But then I do not want to be an antagonist, to antagonize the Ukrainian situation. War is It's bad. It's sad for everybody. But then, policies, yeah, like she said, the problem is from the policy, the people at the top. They don't want change. I don't know, they seem to be afraid of people like myself. And I don't strap a bomb on myself or carry a gun. But still they are afraid. But then they are not afraid of others that come from other societies or other spheres. But then, this is against the fundamental principles of the European core values, as enshrined in your constitution. Rule of law, equality before the law. But for some of us, we are not equal before the law. So what do? That's why I said it's a case of Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. It's a hopeless case. I've been fighting this for the past 7-8 years, shouting the same thing. If you have a kid at home, you give birth to that kid, the kid does not ask you for the same thing every time. He changes as it's growing, you know? But then, do I give up? Of course not. I've come too far to give up at this step now. And then, we just need to come together. I don't know how we do it, but we need to come together to fashion a way out so that everybody will be equal before the law. No discrimination, no segregation. You saw what unfolded in Ukraine during the first part of the crisis. They stopped black people from escaping. A house is on fire. Everybody is trying to jump out of the door. And you say, no, you're white, you're black, stay, let the white people jump first. No, that's wrong. And we need to say truth to power. We need to tell our leaders that those policies are wrong. Mm-hmm. Now you're opening the doors to everybody now, yeah, so say good. But no, it's wrong. So that's my take on what's happening. It's a hopeless case for people that come from my constituency. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We will talk more about this idea of the rule of law, and we will take Lara into the... Don't be afraid. We take you into the conversation a little bit, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about your engagement, your activism. What made you be active in your home country, in Belgium? What was the tipping point?
I think I've always been like... I came to Belgium, my mom's Belgian, my father's from Lebanon, and we moved from Africa to Belgium, so that was a switch when we were 8 years old, and we came from a country in Africa where color wasn't a thing I knew until I came to Belgium, that me and my sister were different. And I think last year I realized, like, I don't have any children, I don't have any boyfriend, I live with my mom, so I might as well actually, like, instead of sending money, I'd actually go help somewhere. So I spent 3 weeks in Dunkirk with helping, like, in the storage rooms and then on the field with the refugees. And now I just try, like, if I have periods where I have shows, I try and help them from afar. And then whenever I have a week off, I go, because it's insane. It's like an hour and 20-minute drive from where I live to this place that is called dystopia to me. It's like parallel realities living an hour away from where you live, and it's just weird seeing these people going from Afghanistan, Somalia, Iran, Iraq, everybody living in tents, children, women, and then you drive back home an hour, and then it's as if there's nothing there. And it was a real eye-opener, because we've grown so accustomed to images on television and on news, and you see it and you get it's part of the world. But when you're in there, then you're like, it's not normal. I mean, it's never been normal, but just like, yeah, it's weird. And then since then, it's a part of me or something, and you try to help wherever you can or how you can, and try not to get too cynical about it, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the whole camp is called Facing New Realities, and all along preparing for this panel, I think this one thought that you just expressed was on my mind as well, that there is also a new reality, of course, in the whole issue of forced migration and displacement. And I think what Larry evoked, that also is interesting to me, because what you said, rightly so, there is a whole framework in the EU for the treatment of anybody. It doesn't matter if it's a displaced person or not. And we have conventions like the Refugee Convention, we have the Charter for Human Rights, we have the Convention for Human Rights. So there's all this rule of law. And Anne, maybe you can give us a little insight into why there's sometimes this impression that we don't really abide to our very own framework.
Yes, I think it's a fact that the rules protecting asylum seekers are not always honored in the EU. There are widespread pushbacks, there are credible reports of people being denied their right to claim asylum at the EU external borders. At the same time, there's always a matter of comparison. For those managing to gain access to EU territory and to protection under European law, there are fairly high standards. So I don't want to completely, deny the worth of the common European asylum system or the rules and protections we have here. There is a real problem with access. There's a real problem with, I think, the debates of the past. Again, at least 5 to 7 years, probably long before that, have been around the issue of how our burdens, responsibilities, however you want to phrase it, shared in a fair manner. And there are different views on that in different parts of Europe. There are those countries with an external border that under the Dublin system have the primary responsibility for people entering the EU, and they feel unfairly burdened by that. Then there's countries like Germany that are sort of popular, attractive final destinations, similar Scandinavian countries, that feel it is unfair that people sort of move through against those rules, that they're meant to stay in the first country of arrival. Then there's the Eastern European bloc broadly, that prior to the Ukrainian war now has very, very strictly and adamantly sort of refused to partake in any sort of responsibility sharing. And of course, an interesting question to what degree the situation as it now plays out might change that for the future, although at this point, the signals are clear that this is considered an exceptional situation and not to be sort of transferred into a broader discourse on equal distribution across the EU. So I think it's a sort of, there are different facets to the entire sort of problem complex. There's the idea, first of all, a discursive idea of people seeking protection primarily being a burden. I've used the word. And I think a shift of mindset of investing in the potential of people arriving here could go a certain way towards alleviating those concerns. There's very legitimate sort of feelings about countries in Southern Europe not having been supported to the right degree in the past. So the overall picture is really one of, on the one hand, EU member states sort of shifting the blame on one another, and then a consensus, I think an unfortunate consensus on trying to strengthen external border control and externalizing the problem to third countries beyond EU territory. And that's a general trend we've seen for many years. I think that is one
which actually holds people back from taking on their right to seek asylum.
Yes, that's true. That there's a dilemma there with the right to individuals seek asylum, and that's also the reason why we see the stark contrast now between the situation at the Polish-Belarusian border and the Polish-Ukrainian border. That really couldn't be more distinct, regardless of geographical proximity. Yeah, so the direction in which all this has been going has not been positive in my view. And the question now is, with this current new situation and the consensus of a general willingness and openness to support people fleeing Ukraine, whether that can be, in the medium term, maybe translated into new approaches towards other groups as well. That would be.
Yeah, I think that's exactly, yeah, that's actually where I would like to pick all of your brains, because the war in Ukraine will not be the last conflict, and we know that migration movement has been augmenting in the last years. So our reaction, as I said, to border control and quotas, like in the famous German Koalitionsvertrag, there's again a cap of 220,000 people maximum. Facing this new reality again, that there will be more migration, I am wondering what would be a better solution, a better handling. Maybe, Larry, you want to say something about that?
I'm not in the place. I'm not a politician. I'm not, you know. Yeah, like I said, the Yigi Yaga is still jostling back and forth. Okay. Take, for example, during the pact, the Global Pact on Migration that was signed in Morocco in 2018, some European countries refused, like Austria, like Hungary. They refused, but today, their doors are open, right? So there's a kind of disparity there. Second of all is, what should be done? Listen, if someone is running from danger, the door must be open to listen to everybody, not just white, black, you know. Be fair. We have laws in this land. Let's respect those laws. I keep on repeating, I do not need to go to court before courts force the system to respect the laws. You understand what I'm saying now? If you apply for an asylum now, it's rejected based on where you come from. And then you take them to court, and then you win. So they are being forced. Why is the state being forced to respect the laws the state created by themselves? And then you see them still fighting each other, even with in the context of the Ukrainian crisis. They still have problems with the quotas in the European Union. Germany wants 200,000, 100,000. Italy says no, France says no, I need 80,000, you know. So they're still fighting amongst themselves. And this is because the so-called legal framework is not adequate enough. It's archaic, it's old. You need to enact laws that resonate with what is happening today in real time. The world is moving fast. And we need, politicians need to move fast on the same pace. If not, you will still be hiding behind laws that were passed in 1950-something, you know? So, I don't know. But in the context of Ukraine, I think everything seems to be fine. But in the context of the general public or people, we need there's still a lot of work to do. How they will do it, I don't know. With this pack of politicians that we have all over the place, I don't really trust them, you know. Their capitalist interest is more important to them than moral interest.
Mm-hmm. The narrative is very much, to my understanding, based on the scarcity, right? And with this scarcity, we actually explain the eligibility of people to seek asylum. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, you were talking also about the images we are seeing, but when we are seeing places like Jordan, or when we are seeing places like Mora, or a place that you are describing, Lebanon, one has to say, what else could be a solution than a scarcity solution? You cannot provide for so many people, and you cannot uphold this rule of law that we actually have agreed on.
And that's why they outsource it now to other countries. The Afghans are outsourced to various countries, even countries in Africa, were paid by the United States government to take refugees, you know? And there are still people running from those countries also seeking refugees elsewhere. So you see the yigi-yaga that I talk about, it's funny, you know? But then, what do? You want to chip in?
I just think maybe it's the issue at hand is what you said about change always brings resilience and resistance, and people are afraid of it because they. But then I think if COVID taught us one thing is that humanity is quite flexible, but it's also about priorities. And there's got to be like a global shift from sail back to soul, because I think for me as a human, I think it's just that we're so consumed and afraid of what we're going to lose. And for sure, for me, it was heartbreaking because you see people get into boats trying to reach the UK. You see people get underneath trucks, and then you see people getting first-class tickets to the. So it makes them already feel, because I've never witnessed so much hope and positivity as that I've seen in these camps. They're super happy, they're mega friendly because they've come from far. And for me, the situation in France was weird because the whole camp is illegal. So it gets destroyed every week. Every week, 50 cars come and 300 policemen come and they burn down tents, and and every organization there starts it again, 2 times a week, which is just insane to watch, because you're like, but where do these people sleep? Yeah, but France doesn't want them. So then they're just around, and then as soon as the cops gone, they come back and they restart building it, and it's like carrying water to the sea instead of having a solution. But I think I don't hate politics, but I'm really bad at politics, because a part of me does really believe that every politician started because they were really convinced they were going to change the world, but then somewhere along the top they got corrupted or something. But I think we're always looking for solutions short term, and that's the big mistake, because like my father's from Lebanon, and they've been housing refugees for the last 10 years and they couldn't do it anymore, and then they started dripping to Europe, and then it's like a panic thing, but they did it for 10 years. They kept it away from our world. And I think the whole migration thing is a plan that it's going to take time, and we have to try and look at it long term, and not like, okay, what we're going to do the next 3 to 4 years, because it's not going to stop. And we've got to find something where the people, because even I felt really angry about the fact that you've had people living in these camps for 3 years that get refused every sense of security or home, and then other people get it like that because it's really urgent. But if you've been on the road for 8 months and you've sold your body to be able to cross borders or witness things that you don't want to see, and still they're like, okay, we get it. They're more flexible, and there's not that much hate as people would think, and fear is something irrational, and we're obsessed by it. We're afraid of losing what we have. We're afraid of something we don't know. And I think that's just a change in society, going from an individualistic kind of point of view to back to the village or something. But as I said, I don't know how to. I'm not verbally good enough to talk to politicians or use their language. But if something should change, it's just a global thing. It's about priorities, and that right now the scale of what is important is completely off for me as an idiot.
Yeah, Theresa, you also mentioned in our pre-conversation that by now you really thought that you would be supported at some point, or that there would be a partnership with some sort of authorities, with Luftbrücke, Kabul, but to date you're still an NGO doing it alone.
Well, we're not quite doing it alone. We are cooperating with the German government. Our work, we have a team in Pakistan, we have a team in Iran. That work wouldn't be possible if the German authorities weren't cooperating with us. We do have more and more conversations with the German Foreign Ministry. So I am slightly hopeful for the first time when it comes to, will there be a shift in Europe's migration policy and asylum policy? And I would actually like to see it go away from asylum and more towards migration, relocation. Let's define it in a different way. Let's set up programs that people can come legally, and they don't come to claim asylum, they were relocated because they were welcomed by, for example, the German government. And I see that this is happening because we have been talking to the German Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Interior. Several NGOs were invited to talk to the ministers about exactly this. How do we establish a program that people can come legally for Afghanistan, yet now specifically? But then I was called, and it was a different, it was also the Foreign Ministry, but and asking about our expertise on how could they build a program for Russians who now need to flee, because they're very specific people also who need to leave Russia right now because they can't stay in this regime. So I think it's a new way of thinking. Look at the countries, look at the needs, and hopefully for the future have more programs that specifically target, that are designed for people from these countries that are fleeing from war, and so they can come legally and with dignity. And this is something that I've witnessed with the Afghans coming, that it's quite a dignified program with which they're coming, because they don't have to claim asylum. They come and they have a visa, and they're allowed to work straight away. They can use all the benefits that you get if you claim asylum. So they can go to German classes and stay in refugee housing for the beginning. But we, in our organization, we have several Afghans working there, and one of them was evacuated recently, and he started working with us straight away and paid taxes after a month, So there are different ways to deal with migration, and I think we might be seeing a shift. I'm sort of hopeful, because when I see that the immense solidarity with Ukraine, paired with the new program that is recently being built for Afghans, but the visa that Afghans now are getting to come to Germany, plus when I'm hearing about this program for Russian dissidents that now need to leave, I'm kind of hopeful that we might be heading in a new direction, and in one where civil society will be part of this shift. I'm seeing more and more political structures working with civil society structures and relying on them, and I think this is it's a good path to go to continue.
Anna?
There are so many points I could sort of pick up and respond to. I don't know where, but on what you said, Theresa, I wholeheartedly share your last point. I think where I see sort of untapped potential that is increasingly being used, and where there is really room for a better future, is in civil society cooperation, or government civil society cooperation, and all three of my fellow panelists here are shining examples of what civil society can do to improve different aspects of the situation. And I think that was something we saw in 2015 with a sort of unfortunate backlash. It's something we see now, and I share your sort of observation that there's a greater openness from the authorities towards constructively acknowledging the part civil society plays, and not just in Germany. I mean, it will be interesting to see how this plays out in Poland, for instance, where the government has, for the past years actively obstructed civil society efforts to support refugees and is now relying on it to a very large degree. So yes, I think this is a really important point. Your sort of optimism with regard to relocation programs replacing the current sort of process of how seeking asylum works. I think I see where you're coming from. I see the programs you're mentioning, specific country programs for Afghanistan, for instance, those make a lot of sense to me and are positive. As a broader shift, there are risks and dangers in that I think need to be highlighted. Countries like Denmark, like the UK, are trying to move in that direction of no one arriving at their borders anymore. It's sort of replacing the idea of organized relocation or resettlement, and that entirely replacing the right to individually claim asylum. And that is a dangerous direction to go into. I'm perfectly aware of the fact that you don't mean to play the two out against each other, but that is happening at the political level in certain instances. So I think there's a need to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because what I was thinking that I would like to see at least the asylum system change, because what we see now with Afghanistan, when the people can work straight away, and this is, I mean, they can get the benefits, but they can also just enter the system really quickly. And I think this would make the politics, asylum politics, so much better already if people arrived in Europe with more dignity already, because they can just be more free in choosing what to do with their life and quicker.
Yes, if I can add one word, the sort of situations both of you were describing, the horrible images we see, the situation in Dunkirk or Moria, those are of course not just images that come about, but those situations are produced politically, and we're meant to see these images, and they're meant to signal that Europe is not a welcoming place, and sort of replacing that with a mindset that views incomers, the newcomers, as productive members of society with their own hopes and plans and ambitions. I think that is a crucial mindset, a crucial change of mindset that would make a positive difference.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would just like to say and commend civil society. Thumbs up for them. They've always been at the forefront of this struggle, be it individuals, organizations, foundations like ZEIT and the rest of them. So for me, they've done well. They can still do more, because one way or the other, the governments of countries listen. When they get stuck, you are the people they fall to find solutions to their political mess, So I think civil societies can effect what we call lobbying and shift policies towards having what both of you have explained as the right way people come in and have rights to basic things in life, work, health, etc., etc., as we see it opened up to the Ukrainians. So it would be nice if pressure groups, lobbying groups, through NGOs that are well respectable, can pressurize the governments and states to adopt this policy. That would be fair, that would be nice. Well, people like myself will stand to see if they will do that for people who are not from a certain sphere. So that's my take on that one.
Mm-hmm. Lara, you want to add?
No. I'm just listening. Everybody's very smart and the remarks are, but yeah, time will tell, I guess. And I think as long as people keep trying to change things, and then that's the only way, because we're not all filthy rich and we don't have that power that politicians and statespeople have. And I guess just if everybody just tries and to be, this is going to sound really stupid, but just be kind, because that's that's what it's humankind, and all these things that we're describing now is about, it's like human not so kind, is why we refuse some people, or why things are working and not working. And I just think it's difficult to get a shift done, because migration is, I think, going to be one of the biggest topics the next years, because the whole world is changing and we're destroying it. So for me, like, priorities, as I was saying, is climate, and then it's world peace, those two, because the world, if there's famine and hunger, people are going to start moving. It's not just wars, it's going to be hunger after that, and as long as there's no shift in what's really important, which is Mother Earth, which we are destroying, and then we can save its people, then this is going to be a very tough cookie to crack, I think. But we're optimistic, and I really believe that things will change, but I think it's just... It's true, I do.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Migration is here to stay, whether we like it or not. It's not going to go away, so don't let us dream. And people migrate everywhere, in every society. It's not just Europe, you know. As a matter of fact, the Western world takes a little portion of the migratory movement, you know. There are people who migrate within countries, within continents, internally displaced people, you know. So it's here to stay, so we just have to live with it, you know.
Yeah, and I think this is what it's about, right? That we deal with it differently, because we've all realized migration is here to stay. It's not going to go away. And this is why we need to reevaluate how we want to deal with this for the next decades, basically. And we've seen in the past that it wasn't very successful. So we need to come up with new solutions, and I think we might be at a point where we can finally have that conversation for real. And Ukraine is pushing that conversation.
Okay.
Wonderful. We have a couple of minutes left, and I don't want you all to myself, so maybe if we have a question from the audience, that would be the time now. Is there, yep, all the way in the back. I don't know if there's a, yeah. You can just say it, yeah. I will repeat it.
Lara kind of touched on it, but climate change is increasing. What is going to become real are the climate justification. It doesn't seem like was part of your conversation. Maybe you can repeat it.
Yeah.
Part of your conversation. So the migration policy framework that you were discussing, where does climate justification?
Yeah. So the question of climate as a reason to migrate, where does it come in the whole framework? Maybe Anne, you can say something about that.
I will try. Yes, we focused on the situation in Europe in this panel, but of course you have your priorities straight. I agree that tackling climate change should be front and center, and that it's important that we view migration as what it is, a symptom of other aspects, and not as it's a fact of life. It's not a problem in itself. There's good reason to look at the underlying drivers and causes, and climate change is for the foreseeable future likely to be a very big one. So yeah, I think that's just in terms of decision makers getting their priorities straight and not worrying too much about individuals moving from here to there, but looking at the root causes. Maybe one positive lesson I would hope to take away from the situation with Ukrainian refugees now is the focus on freedom of movement, on mobility within Europe. And that's really the opposite of the notion of control that has been sort of highlighted in the past very strongly. And I think there's so much positive potential in that. And at the same time, I wouldn't want to see sort of in anything goes versus security concerns as antagonistic. I think there are legitimate security concerns that parts of the population have, and that can be acknowledged and dealt with in a lawful manner without denying people their rights under international law. So I think there's good reason to look more towards the potential of civil society, of people relocating, and do all that sort of flanked by government support that also manages to sort of reassure the population that we're not sort of flaring up organized crime by opening borders.
Well, thank you so much, all four of you. Unfortunately, it's already time to wrap up. Thank you, Lara, Larry, Anne, and Theresa for being here today. And I'm pretty sure conversations and discussion will continue after this. So thank you very much. And thank you all.